Last Sunday, something happened that made me smile all the way home. I had just finished church. The service was over, people were gathering in small groups, and I was making my slow walk toward the parking lot when I heard someone call my name. "Margaret?" I turned around. A young woman, perhaps in her 30s, was hurrying toward me. She looked a little nervous, like she wanted to ask something but wasn't sure if she should. When she finally reached me, she smiled and said, "Margaret, can I ask you a personal question?" I laughed. At 97 years old, I've learned that almost every question is personal. "Of course, dear," I told her. She hesitated for a moment. Then she pointed toward my hair and asked the same question I've heard more times than I can count. "How is your hair still so healthy at 97? Now I know what she expected. Most people expect a secret, a special shampoo, an expensive treatment, a miracle oil hidden away in some bathroom cabinet. But instead of answering right away, I laughed. Because the truth is, when I look in the mirror, I don't see remarkable hair. I see a life. I see silver strands that have survived almost a century. I see the years I spent raising children, the mornings I woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast, the afternoons spent pulling weeds from my garden, the evenings sitting beside my husband after long days that seemed endless at the time, and now somehow feel like yesterday. Every strand carries a memory. Every silver hair tells a story, and perhaps that's why I treasure it, not because it's perfect, but because it stayed with me through everything. You know, when I was younger, I worried about my appearance far more than I do now. I compared myself to other women. I noticed every flaw, every wrinkle, every gray hair, every little thing I wished I could change. But age has a funny way of teaching lessons. One day you realize that the things you spent years worrying about were never the things that truly mattered. And that's exactly what happened to me. Because there was a time, not all that long ago, when I thought I was losing my hair much faster than I should. Every morning I'd look down at my brush, and every morning there seemed to be a few more strands than the day before. At first I ignored it, then I worried. Then I did what many people do. I blamed my age. After all, I was already well into my 90s. What else could it be? But then something happened during a routine doctor's visit that completely changed the way I think about hair. In fact, one simple sentence from my doctor started a chain of habits that I still follow every single day. And according to that young woman in the church parking lot, those habits might be the reason people keep asking about my hair even now. The surprising part? The first habit has almost nothing to do with products, and it actually begins the moment I stop trying so hard. Let me explain. A few years ago, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, holding a hairbrush and feeling frustrated. Not because I expected to look 30 again. Those days were long behind me. But because every time I brushed my hair, I noticed something I didn't like. More strands in the brush, more dryness, more tangles, more breakage. It felt as if my hair had quietly changed without asking my permission. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. One day your hair feels familiar, then suddenly it doesn't. At first, I convinced myself there was nothing I could do. 90-something-year-old women aren't supposed to have healthy hair, I thought. It's just age. But during a routine doctor's appointment, I mentioned my concerns. I expected a quick answer, maybe a vitamin recommendation, maybe a new product. Instead, my doctor asked me a simple question. "Margaret, how often do you wash your hair?" I answered proudly, "Every day. In fact, sometimes twice a day during hot summer weather." I thought I was doing everything right. Clean hair is healthy hair, or so I believed. My doctor smiled. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Your scalp isn't 25 anymore." That one sentence stopped me cold. She explained that as we age, our scalp naturally produces less of the oils that help protect our hair. The very oils I was washing away every single day. In other words, the harder I worked to keep my hair healthy, the more stress I was putting it through. I went home thinking about that conversation, and strangely enough, it reminded me of baking bread. I've baked bread for most of my life. If you constantly open the oven door to check on it, the bread struggles to rise. If you keep interfering, you interrupt the process. Sometimes the best thing you can do is leave it alone. And perhaps hair is a little like that. So I decided to experiment. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive. I simply stopped washing my hair every day. At first, it felt wrong. After decades of doing something one way, change always feels uncomfortable. But I trusted the process. Instead of daily washing, I reduced it to just 2 or 3 times a week, and something surprising happened. Not overnight, not in a week, but little by little, my hair began to feel different, softer, calmer, less brittle, less prone to tangles. Even the ends seemed healthier. For the first time in years, my hair felt like it wasn't fighting me anymore. Now when I do wash it, my routine is wonderfully boring. No fancy bottles, no miracle claims, no products promising to reverse 20 years overnight. Just a gentle shampoo, the kind that cleans without stripping everything away. And afterward, I always use a little conditioner on the ends. Not because I'm trying to create movie star hair, but because older hair appreciates kindness. In fact, that's a lesson aging has taught me again and again. Most things respond better to gentleness than force. Children do, gardens do, marriages do, and yes, hair does too. There was another habit I changed around the same time. One that seemed small but made an enormous difference. You see, after washing my hair, I used to attack it with a towel. I don't know any other way to describe it. I'd rub and scrub as if I were trying to polish a kitchen countertop. The harder I rubbed, the better I thought I was drying it. Then one afternoon, my granddaughter watched me do it. Her eyes grew wide. "Grandma," she laughed, "you're fighting with your hair." I laughed too, but she was right. So now, instead of rubbing, I gently pat it dry, slowly, patiently, the same way you'd handle a delicate piece of lace that's been passed down through generations. And when possible, I let it air dry. If I use a hairdryer, I keep the heat low, very low, because after nearly a century of life, I've learned something important. Strong doesn't mean rough. Strong often means gentle. And that simple change alone made my hair feel healthier than it had in years. But here's what surprised me most. The biggest improvement didn't happen in my bathroom. It happened somewhere completely different, at a place most people never think about when it comes to healthy hair, my kitchen table. And once I understood that lesson, everything changed. The biggest surprise in my hair journey didn't come from a shampoo bottle. It came from a breakfast conversation. And to be honest, I almost missed the lesson entirely. For most of my life, I believed healthy hair was something you applied. You put it on your scalp. You rubbed it into your hair. You bought it in a bottle. That seemed logical enough. But one morning, after another doctor's appointment, I realized I had been asking the wrong question. I had asked him, "Is there a vitamin that keeps hair healthy?" I was hoping for a simple answer. One pill, one solution, one secret. Instead, he smiled and said, "Margaret, healthy hair isn't built by one miracle vitamin." Then he paused. "It's built by habits." For some reason, that sentence stayed with me. Maybe because at 97, you begin to see life differently. You realize that nearly everything worthwhile comes from small things repeated over time. A strong marriage, a beautiful garden, a deep faith, a close family. None of them appear overnight. They're built little by little, day after day, year after year. And according to my doctor, hair is no different. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about my own habits. Not my hair habits, my eating habits. And if I'm being truthful, they weren't terrible, but they weren't particularly thoughtful either. Some mornings I'd have toast and tea, other mornings just tea. Sometimes I'd get busy and forget breakfast altogether. I wasn't giving much thought to whether my body was actually getting what it needed. So I made a simple change, nothing extreme, nothing complicated. I started paying attention to protein. Now, I know that word isn't nearly as exciting as miracle treatments or secret formulas, but stay with me, because this made more difference than any product I've ever tried. These days, most mornings begin with something simple: a couple of eggs, Greek yogurt with berries, cottage cheese and fruit. Nothing fancy, nothing that would impress a chef, just food that helps nourish my body. At first, I wasn't thinking about my hair at all. I was thinking about feeling stronger, having more energy, taking care of myself. But several months later, I noticed something unexpected. My hair seemed healthier. Not younger, healthier. There's a difference. The shine was better, the texture felt softer, and I wasn't seeing quite as much breakage. Was protein the only reason? Of course not. Life is rarely that simple. But I believe it gave my body some of the building blocks it had been missing. And once I saw that change, I became more intentional about the rest of my meals too. My lunch often includes a colorful salad, spinach, tomatoes, cucumbers, sometimes walnuts, sometimes salmon. I've always loved gardens, and one day it occurred to me that healthy gardens and healthy bodies have something in common. Neither thrives on one thing alone. They need variety, different colors, different nutrients, different forms of nourishment. Perhaps that's why the most beautiful flower beds never contain just one flower, and perhaps the healthiest plates shouldn't either. But there was another mistake I made for years, one that many people make without realizing it. And it wasn't about food, it was about water. Now, before you click away because everyone talks about drinking water, let me tell you something embarrassing. For decades, I convinced myself I was drinking enough. After all, I had tea every morning, tea in the afternoon, sometimes tea in the evening. Surely that counted for something. Then one day, my doctor asked me how much plain water I drank. The answer was, not much, far less than I imagined. So I started a tiny habit that became one of the easiest changes I've ever made. I placed a glass pitcher of water on my kitchen counter, not hidden in the refrigerator, not tucked away somewhere I'd forget, right there where I could see it. Every time I walked by, I took a few sips. That's all. No complicated schedule, no giant water bottles, no challenges, just a gentle reminder. And over time, it became automatic. My skin seemed happier, my energy felt steadier, and I genuinely believe my hair benefited too. But the greatest change wasn't protein, it wasn't vegetables, and it wasn't water. The greatest change happened inside my mind, because somewhere along the way, I stopped asking a question that had quietly followed me for years. Instead of asking, how can I make myself look younger? I started asking, how can I care for myself better today? Those two questions lead to very different lives. One is a chase. The other is a form of gratitude, and gratitude changes everything, including the way you see your reflection. But there is one more habit I never skip. In fact, it may be the simplest habit of all. Most people overlook it completely. I certainly did for decades. Ironically, it was a gift from my granddaughter that finally opened my eyes. And now, I rarely step outside without it. A few years ago, my granddaughter gave me a gift that made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I was certain I'd never use it. It was a wide-brimmed straw hat, the kind you'd imagine wearing to a garden party, not while pulling weeds or watering roses. When she handed it to me, I smiled and thanked her. Then I quietly thought, well, that's lovely, but I'll probably leave it in the closet. A few days later, she came to visit, and there I was in the garden, exactly where she expected to find me, without the hat. She shook her head. Grandma! I knew that tone immediately. It's funny how grandchildren eventually learn to speak to you the same way you once spoke to their parents. She pointed at the hat hanging by the door. Wear it! I laughed. Sweetheart, I look ridiculous. Without missing a beat, she replied, I'd rather you look ridiculous than sunburned. That made me laugh even harder, so I put it on. Mostly to make her happy. At least, that's what I told myself. But after a few weeks, something interesting happened. I started wearing it all the time. Not because it was fashionable, because it was comfortable, and because I learned something I wish I'd known years earlier. During a visit with my dermatologist, she explained that the sun doesn't only affect our skin, it affects our hair too, especially aging hair, especially silver hair. As we grow older, our hair naturally becomes more delicate. Years of strong sunlight can leave it feeling drier, rougher, and more fragile. Suddenly, that hat didn't seem so silly anymore. It became one of the easiest forms of protection I could give myself. No expensive treatment, no complicated routine, just a simple hat. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones we overlook the longest. And that lesson reminds me of another mistake I made for years. One that happened every single morning, right in front of my bathroom mirror. I used to brush my hair like I was in a race. Quick, firm, get it done, move on. If I hit a tangle, I'd pull harder. If the brush got stuck, I'd force it through. I never thought twice about it. until one morning I noticed just how many silver strands were left behind afterward. The brush looked like it had collected half my hair. That sight bothered me, so I began paying attention, really paying attention. And I realized something. My hair wasn't resisting me. I was being too rough with it. So I changed my approach. Now I start at the ends. Slowly, gently, patiently. I work my way upward little by little. No yanking, no tugging, no fighting. And you know what? The tangles come out much easier. It's a small thing, a very small thing. But after nearly a century of life, I've learned that small things often create the biggest results. A kind word, a daily prayer, a short walk, a simple phone call. Tiny actions repeated consistently can shape an entire life. The same is true for how we care for ourselves, including our hair. In fact, there's a lesson hidden inside all of this that has nothing to do with hair at all. For years, I believed strength meant pushing harder, working harder, trying harder, fixing everything. But aging taught me a different definition of strength. Sometimes strength is knowing when to be gentle. Sometimes strength is patience. Sometimes strength is accepting what needs care instead of forcing change. And nowhere is that lesson more visible than when I look in the mirror. Because when I see my silver hair now, I don't see something that's fading. I see something that has endured. Think about that for a moment. These silver strands have been with me through weddings, funerals, birthdays, heartbreaks, victories, ordinary Tuesdays, extraordinary Sundays. They've witnessed nearly a century of life. Why wouldn't they deserve a little kindness? And that's when I finally understood something that took me 97 years to learn. The real secret was never a product. It was never a treatment. It was never a miracle ingredient. It was the way I treated myself, the way I cared for what I already had. And that realization changed far more than my hair. It changed the way I approached aging itself. Because once I stopped fighting the years, I started enjoying them. But there is one final truth I share whenever someone asks about my hair. It's the most important lesson of all. And if you remember only one thing from our conversation today, I hope it's this. So whenever someone asks me, "Margaret, what's your secret?" I smile. Because by that point, I already know they're expecting a different answer. They're expecting the name of a shampoo, a vitamin, a product they can order tonight, something simple, something they can hold in their hands. But the truth is, the most important thing I've learned about healthy hair can't be bought in a bottle, and it took me nearly a century to understand it. You see, when I was younger, I spent a lot of time trying to improve myself. There's nothing wrong with that. We all want to look our best. We all want to feel confident. But somewhere along the way, I crossed a line without realizing it. I stopped caring for myself and started criticizing myself. Every new wrinkle felt like bad news. Every gray hair felt like something to hide. Every sign of aging felt like a problem to solve. Maybe you felt that way too. Maybe you've looked in the mirror and immediately noticed the one thing that changed. The thing that isn't quite what it used to be. The thing you wish you could fix. I understand. I truly do. But age has given me a different perspective. Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't see what I've lost. I see what remains. I see a woman who has lived, a woman who has loved, a woman who has made mistakes, learned lessons, buried loved ones, welcomed new babies, celebrated milestones, and kept moving forward through seasons she once thought she'd never survive. And suddenly, a few silver strands don't seem so important anymore. In fact, they feel like badges of honor. Each one is proof of a year I was fortunate enough to experience. A year filled with moments that many people never had the chance to see. That's why I no longer compare my hair today to my hair at 20. That young woman had her season. She was beautiful in her own way. But this woman has her season too, and there is beauty here as well. A quieter beauty, a deeper beauty, a beauty that comes from gratitude rather than perfection. So if you're wondering what I actually do for my hair, here's the honest answer. I wash it gently instead of constantly. I use a little conditioner. I avoid unnecessary heat whenever I can. I eat nourishing foods. I make sure I get enough protein. I drink more water than I used to. I protect my hair from harsh sunshine. I brush it with patience. And most importantly, I try to treat myself with the same kindness I would offer a dear friend. Those habits may sound ordinary, because they are. There is no magic here, no miracle, just small acts of care repeated over many years. And perhaps that's why they've lasted, because the habits that truly change our lives are rarely dramatic. They're usually quiet, simple, almost forgettable, until one day we look back and realize they made all the difference. You know, I often think about that young woman from church, the one who stopped me in the parking lot. As she walked away, she thanked me for answering her question. But the truth is, she gave me something too. She reminded me that people are searching for hope, not just hope for healthier hair, hope that growing older doesn't mean losing yourself, hope that life can still be beautiful in its later chapters, hope that there is joy waiting beyond the fear of aging. And if my 97 years have taught me anything, it's this. There truly is. Growing older isn't something that happened to me. It's something I've been blessed to experience. Not every day has been easy. Not every year has been kind. But every season has carried its own gifts. And some of the sweetest moments of my life arrived long after I thought the best years were behind me. So if you've noticed your hair changing, if you've noticed your reflection changing, if you've been feeling discouraged by the passing years, I hope you'll remember something. Your worth has never been measured by the color of your hair, or the smoothness of your skin, or the number on a birthday cake. Your worth comes from the life you've lived, the love you've given, the kindness you've shown, and the person you've become along the way. Those things never fade. In fact, they often grow stronger with age. And that's a kind of beauty no mirror could ever fully capture. Before I go, I'd love to hear from you. How old are you today? And what is one lesson life has taught you that you wish you'd learned sooner? I read as many comments as I can, and I genuinely enjoy hearing the wisdom people share from all over the world. Because no matter our age, we're all still learning from one another. Thank you for spending these precious minutes with me. Thank you for allowing me to share a small piece of my story. May your days be filled with good health, gentle moments, and people who make you smile. And remember, the goal isn't to have the hair you had 20 years ago. The goal is to care for the person you are today. And that, my dear friend, is more than enough.